Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, the dark files of Lazarus, case number 13. Lazarus, the city built upon the ashes of Los Angeles, has irony in mounds as high as the carbon steel coins piling up in the newly formed vaults. Theo Baxton was the 13th child born into this city after its establishment. Blessed at birth, cursed at life. Again, the irony piles on. Superstitions aside, young Theo had the average childhood of those in the city. A busy father, a mother who stayed at home making a side business for her personal hobbies, schools located on the outskirts as a means to accommodate all from different walks of life, rival gangs that start between said schools and end up either inside of the city or inside the ground. Theo was no exception. He was branded to the Cater Kings, a gang that sought to make money between other gangs as an intermediate and peacekeeping family. Fees were issued to them to end turf wars before they started, a fair sum of carbon steel coins and fruit seeds that could also be traded in for food and weaponry. Young Theo was trained as the accountant of the group, having excelled in his classes of mathematics. In fact, given his devotion to the numbers, he was also allowed to freelance between the gangs. Word would spread throughout Lazarus of the boy genius with a fist in fights and a hand in banks, and he had his own office flat amongst the perks of a local celebrity. This climb would continue for 3 years until the peace was finally shattered. A Third World War was an ongoing rumor even in this decade, but the threat of such was a temptation that could no longer be ignored. The federal government, trying to keep its iron hand upon the nation's throat. At the same time, groups of states were seceding from the Union, starting with Texas and Florida. California was arguing its points to secede despite being government central for years. Tensions were high everywhere, and all it would take was one little push. According to an associate of Theo, who wished to remain anonymous, a letter with no return address and a waxed seal pressed with an emblem of a serpent eating its own tail. Inside, Theo told his associate that it was from someone named Enzo, asking for help to what was described as a complicated accounting error. Despite Theo's policy to only work with people within the city, the letter promised a large reward, $50 million in carbon steel, with an extra $5 million sent to him as an incentive. All he had to do was leave his answer outside of his door by the second day of receiving the letter. The answer was yes. On the fourth day, the associate stated that a large sum of carbon steel was made to Theo's personal vault. The bankers, however, refused to divulge information at the time according to their privacy policies, and insisted that since no amount of money was stolen or missing, that this was just another paycheck for Mr. Baxton. Come the afternoon, a large box was delivered to Theo's office, containing paperwork and USBs pertaining to the error mentioned in the letter from Enzo. Theo did examinations and cross-examinations, contacted different businesses, and even got in touch with several tax collectors. Apparently, several different accounts belonging to key figures within the city gangs were seized, and the paperwork of each were sent to the wrong people in authority, all of which were dismissed under negligence. Now, no longer needing any trials, the figures could get their money back, but the public servants refused to be involved with the returns. Instead, Theo was contacted as a representative of the Cater Kings to oversee the return of the physical funds. The associate then told of what happened over the next few weeks. Delivery trucks containing wooden boxes of the promised funds were driven to the outskirts of Lazarus, where the gangs of the prominent figureheads awaited to take to the vaults personally. The associate noted two things that were strange. All the truck drivers wore masks, and all the boxes were locked with their designated keys back at the vaults, awaiting in the hands and granted access only by the bank personnel. Still, the gangs were happy to have their money back, and they praised Theo and the Cater Kings as heroes. The associate refused to answer any more questions, as he had pled the fifth with great tremoring. He was excused and escorted back to his home. The rest of the case was a jigsaw of events relayed by the media that left Lazarus with blood in the streets, controversies and conspiracies, and many unanswered questions. Several stores and storage facilities of fruit seeds were set ablaze over a course of 9 days. A week later, large crowds were running at large around the streets whilst throwing glass bottles and broken pieces of concrete at vehicles and buildings. Citizens were set in a panic as droves of gang members washed upon them like a furious flood. The local police had to team up with the city's firefighters to stem the flow of violence, but they were outnumbered and could only give way yard by yard. The hospitals were soon filled to capacity with victims of the assaults, several of which were fatal. What caused this outburst? It turned out that it had to do with a bounty of 10 million carbon steel coins for the capture of Theo Baxton, with double if caught alive. Apparently, one of the heads of the gangs issued the order not long after the delivery of the boxes to the banks. A call was made from the bank once the packages were opened, citing fraud via forgery and non-delivery of goods, followed by a plea for help against an all-out mob assault. The police noted that none of the perpetrators used any weapons outside of the bank's own supplies, from chairs to pens and even magazines, with hysterical employees reporting threats against the traitor, the embezzling rat, with maledictions attached. Theo himself was unable to be reached, for he was no longer in Lazarus. Another of his associates, before dying of his wounds in one of the hospitals mentioned earlier, only uttered this: "Had to get him out. He, not in the wrong, framed. Got him out to a friend. Gotta find Enzo." The assessment by the city's detectives were as followed. Theo was made aware of the goods inside of the containers, which turned out to be lead bars. He was made to lay low as the Cater Kings tried once more to keep the peace. The turmoil was spiraling off the rails, and the Kings were placed in the spotlight. The head of the Cater Kings, who also remains anonymous, promised the others that he would provide them with the guilty party members, i.e., he was going to offer Theo up as a sacrifice. Theo was made aware of this by one or more of his associates, official or on the outside yet on his payroll, and had to arrange for departure. Then came the arson, and that pushed everyone over the edge in desperation, especially with the bounty issued and made public despite the denial of the gang leaders giving such an outcry. Theo and company had to fight their way out of his flat and office to the getaway vehicle, which had to blow through pockets of people, as obtained from the records of different doctors overseeing patients who were all victims to the same speeding car that bowled them onto the streets. All good things must come to an end, and for a young man with a talent for numbers, it was almost curtains. About 900 people were admitted to the hospitals, with 88 losing their lives. Amongst the lost were 13 cops, 15 firefighters, 9 store owners, and a mixture of citizens and gang members. In the aftermath of one of the darkest moments of Lazarus, the questions still rebound about the roads and haunts. Who was Enzo? Who really sent the bounty, if not any of the gang leaders? Where was the money? Where is Theo Baxton? Until the young accountant is apprehended, no one knows. There is doubt that even he will know. Authorities are looking as far as the coastlines, but so are many a gang member, with the Cater Kings intent on making good of their promise. Once, a city of angels was promised. Now, a den of devils has been erected, and it calls out for nothing less than vengeance. Hoodwinked. The only thing worse than tracing a witness 5 years after is to find out he has forgotten all about the crime, or at least the bits that matter. But Detective Syed was no greenhorn. He smiled at the 19-year-old who was sitting across the table devouring his second plate of chicken cafriel. So, is the chicken tangy enough? Yes, Detective. Thank you for buying me lunch. Daniel D'Souza grinned, his cheeks still plump with the spicy treat tucked in. Not at all. Thanks for agreeing to meet me here. Detective Syed swirled the sparkling water, then took another swig. It was a hot April afternoon, and Baga Beach looked bare. I know it's hard for you to talk about it, but what you can tell me can save a life. The fork fell into the green sauce, and the young man picked it back up. He wiped the corners of his mouth with the paper napkin Britos had stacked at every table, and met Detective Syed's gaze. Sir, I was just 14 at the time, and was visiting my uncle, and helped him in his gallery that sold souvenirs and other knickknacks. Detective Syed completed the statement and cataloged the antiques. It was off-season, and he had very few customers walking in. So, you used to stay till the shop closed in the evening? Yes. And what time would it close? All shops in Panaji close around 8 p.m. I thought you knew it, the youngster snorted. So, you closed at 8 p.m. every evening? Yes. No exceptions? Not any that I can recall? Well, on the 30th of April, 2016, it was open at least till 9:30 p.m. Afterwards, the CCTV blanked out. Oh, it was the last day of the month. Maybe it was open for stock-taking, staying open late at night after a whole day of no business? Detective Syed cocked his left eyebrow. Detective, can I leave now? I'm not feeling too well, and I can't recall much. Daniel tried to slide out of his bamboo chair. The detective's eyes held steady. Daniel, I have not even started asking anything yet. And you know I'm going to get to it one way or the other. So, why don't you help me out here? I can be of no help to you, Detective. I shouldn't even have come here. It was a mistake. Daniel got up and hobbled on the slippery sand. Detective Syed cleared his throat and said in a voice that rose above the waves that crashed outside, we went through the old CCTV footage. It shows someone coming out of the shop at 9:30 p.m. Daniel stopped in his tracks and turned. He walked back to the table and growled. You know, Detective, I was a minor at the time and can't be charged with anything. True, but you could have been sent to a juvenile detention center. Could have been, but wasn't. Wait, for what? Daniel's face turned red. For whatever you didn't confess to, Detective Syed said in an even tone as he gestured for Daniel to sit down. We are not here to talk about it, though. We are here to discuss the footage we got from Tanishq Jewelry 3 days ago. Daniels sported the same look as the fish kept on the ice at the entrance. So, Daniel, how about you sit down and I'll order you a bibinka? No, thanks. I'm full. What is it that you want to know? Daniel, on the night of 30th April 2016, between 9 to 10 p.m., robbers drilled a hole in the back wall of Swarna Jewelers and hauled the stuff worth INR 8 crore with them. As you already know, it's next to Pablo's gallery. You didn't hear anything? No. As my uncle said at the time, I was not there. Daniel rasped through a clenched jaw, which we know now is not true. How can you say that? I'm sure many own a hoodie of the same brand, but I'm sure they will not be wearing one on a humid April night. And who said anything about a hoodie? What hoodie? Daniel countered. Detective Syed let out a chuckle. He knew it was the best antidote for teenage bravado. Okay, the same one that the CCTV outside Tanishq captured 3 days ago. This one should be easier to remember. Daniel's face turned pale. What is the connection between the two? You tell me. The detective parlayed in a calm voice. Okay, I was helping my uncle at the store the night Swarna Jewelers was looted. But I swear, we didn't hear a thing. We had almost finished when a man in a dark blue hoodie turned up at the store asking for a lighter. He was wearing shades, and I found that suspicious. He didn't realize I was watching him as he took out his wallet and dropped a gun. My uncle at the register could not see it, but I did. The vase in my hand fell, and the next moment, the gun was pointed at me. Okay, what happened next? I can't remember what exactly happened. Daniel's eyes were like the floodgates about to be opened. Detective Syed leaned back on his tubby chair, rocked the back of his head in his knitted hands, and cajoled. Take a deep breath and try again. That bibinka is still on the offer? I think my uncle begged him to spare me. The man asked us to turn off the CCTV and stay in the shop, and left. Was that what happened? Yes. And you left the city the next day to return after 5 years? Yes. Only the new CCTV footage we found from Tanishq across the street tells a different story. Detective Syed leaned forward and drummed his fingers on the table. Which is, Daniel sniggered, the man in the hoodie never walked out of the gallery. Daniel's eyes went wide. But you said you saw him walk out. No, it was a 14-year-old who walked out wearing a dead man's hoodie. Daniel gulped air. Detective Syed half shut his eyes, scratched his chin, and continued, and walked back into Tanishq store 3 days ago. And quite possibly other places across Goa before that. I have a theory. He was tracked down by the fellow robbers of the dead man. They made him an offer he could not refuse. Be a part of their gang, or go to juvie for murder. Daniel's face went blank. He whispered in a trembling voice, nice theory. I came back as I got admission into a college in the city, which is a nice cover-up. Daniel, you don't have to tell me what happened at the gallery that night. And I think I know the reason why you wore the same hoodie. Which is? Supposing your theory is correct, you wanted to be rescued. Is that a possibility? Daniel's eyes begged, still too scared to be hopeful. Yes, if you can help nab the gang and finish eating bibinka sins and sinners. Secrets carry weight like lead. Iris inhaled the pleasant air, which was ripe with the dewy petrichor of the post-rain evening. A cool breeze ruffled the leaves of nearby lofty mango trees, all of which were well endowed with succulent yellow mangoes. The sky was shades of pretty pink and purple pastels, making her way down the narrow path between the tall trees. She recollected her memories with Dante, Isabel, Rhett, and Jax, running along the shore, pushing each other in the sea, and dreaming about sailing the world one day. They would stand and watch the sea crash onto the shore for hours, and it'd still never be enough. She remembered standing on the cliff with her friends and taking in the salty sea breeze. When the sun would set, the vast body of water would reflect the warm colors of the endless sky, and there hadn't ever been a more beautiful sight. She'd gaze at it for hours, fantasizing about unending aspirations and dreams. Iris traced the carvings on the trees she used to very much enjoy making, with scraps of metal and pieces of wood she mysteriously found every day. She suspected it was Jax, always doing these little things for her that could brighten her day. He could rarely say no to her, which led to them being part of quite questionable activities. She'd once said that she wanted to visit the yearly carnival on her birthday, and the next day she found the gleaming golden entry tickets of the carnival on her bed. She didn't really question where he got the tickets from, since they cost a lot, and he wasn't from a rich family. But she did remember him mentioning a friend who owed him a favor. Isabella and Rhett had been so jealous that day. Iris giggled, recalling the look on their faces. As she ventured further on the narrow path between the tall trees, the pastel-colored sky started to fade away into the dark shadows, from dusty lilac to indigo, and from indigo to inky black. A cool breeze blew, ruffling the leaves of the nearby mango trees, which were swaying to the notes of the wind. Iris shuddered, feeling the wind on the bare skin of her arms. She had half a mind to spend the whole night there, but even she knew it wasn't the best decision to invite the dangers lurking in the dark. Too lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice where she was keeping her foot. Instead of stepping on the hard rocks and stones, she stepped on the muddy soil. Her eyes went wide as she tried to grab a stray branch in hopes of regaining her balance. But down went she, and the stray branch with a thud. Dear Lord, things just can't go right for too long, is it? Iris internally screamed. Holding on to the bark of a nearby tree, she got back up on her feet with much difficulty and brushed off the dirt from her limbs. She looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars were in close clusters. But the full moon blazing in the sky was even more beautiful than than the stars around. She smiled as she thought of the days she and her friends used to gaze at the moon together and talk about a fictional world that was everyone's personal paradise. Sadly, growing up had burst her bubble of believing that she could ever live in a place where the sky met the seas. With a sigh, she looked at the rich brown soil, padding around to look for her phone. Walking around in the mud, leaving her footprints behind, she heard a satisfying crunch. A shiver ran down her spine, and she visibly shuddered. Believing that the sound was of her own footstep, Iris took a step backward and crouched down. She started digging around in that area, throwing away the twigs, leaves, and lumps of soil she came across till she felt something papery. Scrunching her brows, she pulled up the small piece of paper from the ground and held it in her hands. The paper was tattered and torn from the edges and dust-laden with a tint of yellowish tan. She blew air onto it and wiped off the remaining dirt on her white blouse, leaving behind an unlovely stain. It's not like it is clean anymore, to begin with, Iris huffed. Squinting her eyes and looking closely at the paper, she realized it was a photograph of a younger version of Rhett, Jax, Isabella, and herself. Huge grins showing their crooked teeth and resting their arms on each other's necks. Those wonderful memories came rushing back to her. But the small smile on her face vanished as she remembered how her wonderful childhood had a terrible turn of events. Chartusa, Rhett had always been the golden child in their circle. However, he did have a mean streak to him. Envy rolled off him whenever someone else outdid him. Over the years, harmless cursing turned into aggressive shoving, pushing, and malevolent acts driven by hostility. He was at the point where he used to be jealous even when Jax, Isabella, and Iris used to hang out in pairs sometimes. Isabella called it a phase of extreme insecurity. Perhaps he felt that his friends wouldn't want to hang out with him if he wasn't the best. Perhaps he believed the quote, "Either you're something or you are nothing at all," a bit too much. Nonetheless, whatever it wasn't going to end well for him if he didn't change his unpleasant behavior. She'd contemplated on staying away from Rhett, but Isabella told her that they wouldn't want his situation to worsen. She had reluctantly agreed. After a few days, Rhett's birthday arrived. Isabella had decided to throw him a surprise party that would cheer him up. Iris and Jax helped her decorate, and all of them awaited Rhett's grand arrival. Grand was an understatement. Rhett had arrived, reeking of strong alcohol. Ignoring the presence of Isabella and Iris, he headed straight towards Jax and held him by his collar. His lips curled in disgust as he uttered some unmentionable words. processing the enormity of what just happened, the girls ran towards Rhett to pull him away from Jax. But Rhett already managed to land a punch in the poor guy's face, escaping the grip of Isabella and Iris. He kept on punching Jax till his knuckles were bloody. Horrified, Iris grabbed the nearest object which she could find, which turned out to be an iron-made decor, and slammed it against Rhett's head. Ceasing his torture on Jax, he brought his hand towards his bleeding head and caught a few drops of blood on his fingertips. He felt lightheaded as black spots started appearing in front of his eyes in the cold silence that followed. All of them could almost hear Rhett's last heartbeats as he closed his eyes, took his final breath, and fell on the floor with a loud thud. "He's gone." Isabella broke the silence, her eyes void of any emotion. "I'm sure he's in a better place now." Isabella continued, after no one spoke a word. "What have I done?" whispered Iris, tears threatening to come out of her eyes. It still seemed unreal. "You did what was right. You ended his reign of terror. Best he be dead than alive," Jax said, anger evident in his tone as he looked at the ghoulish body of his once best friend. "Why did he do that to you? Did something happen between you two?" Iris asked Jax. Not receiving a response, she prompted again. "Answer me, Jax. I can't live with the guilt, but at least I'll die peacefully, knowing that what I've done was for the right reason." Did he need a reason any longer to punch the shit out of his friends? Said Jax. "What happened between you two?" she asked for the second time. "Stop asking that question again and again," Jax said, his teeth grinding together. "Why? Don't you realize what has just happened? How can you be so... Iris was at a loss for words. "You know that's a bloody problem of yours. All you and your selfish nature do is present yourself as the victim. Stop making everything about you, Iris. Stop pressuring me. And it's you who has killed him, not us." Oh, so I should have let him beat you to death, is it?" "That would have been better than this," said Jax, his eyes icy as he stomped away, as if her soul could bleed an ocean through the eyes. That was the enormity of Iris's sobbing. Isabella hugged her, slowly rocking her body as if she was a little child. "Iris, he didn't mean any of that. He is just upset. Anyone would have felt that way, I'm sure. What you did, it wasn't wrong. It was inevitable. You freed him from the evil inside," consoled Isabella, who had been quiet all this long. "How do you even understand 1% of what we're feeling anyway? You didn't do any of this." Iris laughed humorlessly. "Rhett was the closest to you than any of us. Didn't you consider him your friend? Don't you feel the least sad about it? You don't seem to be grieving at all. Just because I don't express it does not mean I don't feel it. And Rhett was as much of a friend to me as he was to the rest of us. Would you rather he attain peace through death, or rather he continue inflicting violence and chaos on us? Iris didn't say anything afterward. The weight of the guilt was heavy. Despair was a crushing force on her chest, constricting her breath and coloring the world around her. Black as she too was slowly engulfed by the darkness. That is exactly how a tragedy like theirs breaks one's heart, making one believe that the ending might still be happy until the very last minutes. Iris flipped the photograph, returning to the present day, and read the words she had written a long time ago. Which of us could say we were more sinned against than sinning? Rayner Kelly's Murder Soulmate. People are fools. This was a thought he'd held on to since he was a boy, and it had held true for his entire life till that point. Even as Rayner drove on the roads of his favorite mountain range, he could only think back to the sorts who proved it to him. Those sorts of people he couldn't even be angry at, the kind of idiots that got themselves lost in his favorite places. It wasn't as if he cared for any particular demographic. He liked to hurt them more if they were pretty, more so if they were tame. But he was always one for opportunity. That might have been how he managed his body count. Serial killers without a known type are harder to catch, as far as he'd heard. Though, considering how high the body counts were for easier cases, he had his reservations. It could have been how he killed. While he wasn't exactly messy, he didn't try to be fancy with his targets. He'd done it before. Long, drawn moments with strangers in discreet, abandoned places. But when all was said and done, he was careful. That, and he was a fairly big guy. He was a hard man to escape, made his marks all the more foolish for trusting him. It wasn't all that late when he happened upon his next mark. A young man, inching to it, really, with a lovely mop of hair just by the side of the road. "Hello, sir. I kinda sprained my ankle. Could you drive me to a gas station or something?" the kid asked softly. He looked embarrassed by the entire situation. Rayner liked that, so he opened his passenger door for him. The kid was asking, after all. He watched as the kid arranged himself on the passenger side, careful to buckle himself in. The kid seemed a mite more cautious now, considering his ankle. Rayner started after that, taking his merry time since the kid wasn't worrying directions. "So, what had you so far out?" Rayner asked with a sideways glance. The kid had been looking out the window, contemplating something, before glancing over to him. "Oh, nothing much, just the scenery," the boy said. "Is it all right if I do some writing here?" "I don't exactly have a charging setup," Rayner said, still playing the Samaritan. The kid took out a small journal. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm a bit old school," he said, trying to look cool. He kinda did if Rayner were at all honest. Rayner could have driven with his eyes closed, but he still only looked over occasionally, seeing the kid scribble away on a relatively clean page in his book. "So, what do you like to write about?" "Bodies." "Oh, what kind of bodies?" he asked innocuously. "Anybody, anything." "Oh." he said, hoping for something more specific. It was well enough that the kid was mostly quiet after that. Rayner wasn't so over-curious of this next body. Couldn't be that clever this far out. Didn't stop him from being a bit disappointed with the answer, what they were, rather than the state they were in. He was still a bit mesmerized with the kid, scratching away on a half-empty journal he was never gonna fill. He wondered, like any man oughta, how the kid managed to see anything past his fringe. But it seemed weird to impose on something like that. That mop would be safe enough to cut when the kid was dead, if he was really in the mood for a trophy. Beyond that, it was the kinda night he wanted to take slowly. The kid was marked for it. Rayner liked to take it slow sometimes. I still gotta wonder what got you out so late. I thought I told you? Oh, whatever, the kid whispered, before asking, is it all right to say I've got terrible friends? Well, hey, we've all been in bad crowds before, Rayner stated. He liked getting them out of the shell before the fun. Yeah, Rayner couldn't see where the kid was looking. I don't think I caught your name. No, you didn't. Be fair, I didn't catch yours either. Ah, I'm Callum. Let me guess. Your mom had a thing for soap operas? No, saints, actually, the kid corrected with a laugh. My mom had a thing for cryptids. Rayner paused at the non sequitur, thinking over what to say. He could be honest, tell the kid his name, hear that begging catch on his throat later. Or he could lie, make him guess. It won't matter if I don't know your real name, you know, the kid said, catching his apprehension. Rayner stopped to think about where they were, where the closest safe house was, before saying, no, I was just surprised. I'm Rayner Kelly. Because he liked the kid's voice. The kid was quiet after that, the only noise from the passenger side being the press of pencil to paper, the sound of a zipper. Then, as if struck by something, he felt a sharp presence through his leg, reacting with a hit to the face, which knocked the kid out. Without much thought as to the proper thing to do, Rayner pulled the knife out. Rayner felt his own hot blood flow from his thigh, and all he could think was, the little maniac stabbed me. He looked down at his leg, realizing that the kid, with all the luck, nicked something proper. He stole the kid's belt, since he was still out, and made a tourniquet. Frazzled by the entire ordeal, he decided to push the kid out the passenger side and step it to the nearest hospital. A night held up in the emergency room was an interesting addition to his night, just as the injury to his femoral artery was. It was a lucky break, not dying from it, but the kid was still out there. He'd done something foolish, and while Rayner wasn't especially scared of getting caught, he didn't like being blindsided like that. It would be a while after that before he'd think of it again. When he cleaned out his car, Rayner, having killed on the go before, knew that anything could drop from a body. Licenses, gum, IDs, and phones were some of the most incriminating. So he really couldn't afford to keep a dirty car. That's when he found the journal, the last thing the kid dropped before trying to get the drop on him. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, and while at once familiar in the light of day, he could see the character of its use. Kid was careful closing it before pulling that nonsense. And while his car had been a mess for a while, the pages were mostly clean. He flipped through, looking for IDs that might incriminate. And when he couldn't find any, he thought to throw it away, even without something concrete. The book was filled with the kid's writings, and being by hand, his composition and identity could be ascertained. It was the kinda circumstantial evidence detectives and juries ate up. With the car no longer in disarray, he could throw it out, forget about the one night where the tables almost turned altogether again. He thought of the journal, of his hands and head. This was all he was gonna have of that. And for once, amongst the dark thoughts and bad memories, he wanted to keep it. It was only then did he read it. Page upon page of poetry. And though it was the simplest thing it could be, he was infatuated with it. The first page, dated a decade before, I am beauty. I am soft, a crooked rumble. To strange human love, she wonders fondly, where are you, dear? While I am dry and rotting here, I am claws. I am fear, a hissing mess to his cruel intent. I am flesh. I am bones. The kid was killing cats back then, writing poetry about it even. Rayner was taken back to his first experiments, neighborhood pets, and the like he dispatched out of curiosity. Though the kid never wrote his age or full name in any of them, he could tell that it was quite a bit more than poetry. It was something he'd never thought to do. Write about them with this intense distance. Some were short and recent. I am small. I am buzzing. My life is sweet. My stripes are fuzzy. Inside, I'm soft. My stingers not. None are things the dead can flaunt. Before he knew it, he felt familiar with the kid, like he was more than a liability, as close as a journal scratched halfway through. It really was anything, anybody, to him. I am lovely. I am strong. My tendons were cut. My fat is gone, lost beneath 2 or 3 feet. There are no feelings the dead get to keep. Rayner thinks, reading through Callum's poetry book, about that night and how it went. Every little lie that he didn't bother telling. How ready he was after saying his name. He wonders, what'll I do when I'm on the prowl again? Hungry for new pretty faces. How long before he thinks about the kid as just a liability again? And not the one that got away. The cursed town. Content warning. Murder, suicide. He walked up through the dusty road which led to the small town of Timmins. It was twilight, and a light wind was blowing. Far away, the crop plantations acquired a greenish-orange color due to the light of the sun. On the other side, one could catch a faint glimpse of the Timmins church, with its tall steeple standing majestically high up in the sky. The yellow-orange hue of the sky washed the town, and the muddy red road was illuminated with a touch of gradient yellow. The whole town looked peaceful, and surprisingly, nobody was outside their houses. He entered the town and looked at the banyan tree in front of him. It had remained much the same. He looked up at the houses and walked towards them. Darkness was falling now. The red-orange hue was slowly swept away, and a dark blue color entered, only with a touch of crimson at its bottom. Shadows fell here and there, creating a spooky atmosphere, and he quickened his pace, as if to avoid the evil spell cast by the shadows of the houses. The moon came up, not too bright, for clouds were starting to surround it from all sides. He glanced upwards and realized that he had to take shelter somewhere. Rainfall could occur any time now. He walked through the dusty and muddy road and looked here around for inns, but there were none. Finally, he found a big apartment, which was deserted. He let out a sigh of relief and walked up the stairs and entered the apartment. It was evident that the apartment was still under construction work. It was not completed. However, years of neglect had withered away the raw smell of the brick walls, and small plants could be seen growing almost everywhere. All of them had a feeling of evil in them. The brick walls, the plants, the floors, and even the ceiling. It was like they had witnessed a lot of sad events and were telling him not to go further inside the house. The house itself was spooky, with its large corridors and almost no rooms. A huge, round staircase led to the other floors. The grayish appearance of the apartment matched perfectly with his gray and withered t-shirt and pants. He went up the staircase and reached the terrace. It was broad and wide, and one could see the beautiful town stretched before it. He looked down and was surprised to see an old woman with a lantern standing in the doorway of the apartment, waving her hands to call him. He descended the staircase and ran out of the apartment to meet the old woman. The woman was short in stature and had gray hair, with sometimes a tint of black in them. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked at him through her cat-green eyes, piercingly. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "I am a visitor, and I came here for certain business matters. I could not find any inn to spend the night in, so I came here," he said. She looked at him suspiciously, and then said, "Okay, you better come with me. This place is not good, especially at night." He nodded his head and followed the old woman. He was cold with fear and could not understand what was happening. He followed her till they reached a cottage, and the old woman asked him to enter. He went inside and enjoyed the warmth of the fire which was lit. He sat down on a sofa, and the woman came to her with a candle. She placed the candle on the table and handed him a plate. "You must be hungry. Here, have some food. You better not go to the apartment anymore." "Why?" he asked. "It's a long story. I have seen too much of this world to remember happy deeds. Most are evil." "What do you actually mean? Do you want to hear?" "Yes, I do. She took a long, deep breath and then began. Long ago, when I was about 17 years of age, there used to live a plantation owner named Hamilton. He had a lot of money and was very rich. You see those plantations? All those were Sir Hamilton's. He was not only rich, but kind and generous too. He used to donate with open hands. He had a beautiful wife, 4 daughters, and 1 son. However, naturally, his neighbors were very jealous of him and despised him. He did not care that much for that. But one day, his neighbors attacked his family. His daughters were of almost my age then, and the son was only a baby. They killed his daughters and his wife, but somehow Hamilton and his son were able to escape. Why did not Hamilton inform the police? He asked. There was no evidence against the neighbors. He had nothing to do. I later heard that he had fled somewhere to Canada. But how does it relate to the apartment? The old woman sighed. Her green eyes glistened, and she said the apartment was being made by Hamilton. He wanted to turn it into a hospital. Yes, but how does that matter anyway? Rain had started falling heavily, and the fire and candle went out. The 2 people were left in total darkness. However, he could still see the old woman's eyes glistening. The old woman said, "For the past few years, there had been a lot of suicides there. Many girls of around 16 to 17 years are committing suicide there. It all started with the daughter of Mrs. Morpin. She jumped from the terrace we were standing a few minutes ago. The second case was of Mrs. Rayon's daughter. She was found hanging from the chandelier one morning, her face white and terror-stricken. He was taken aback and looked at the old woman with wide and fearful eyes. Lightning struck, illuminating the whole room for a moment, and he could see the old woman's face, ugly, wrinkled with a strong, piercing glance, which was almost witch-like. He wanted to run out of the house, but some strange power kept him rooted to his seat. The old woman said, "You better go to sleep now. I guess you had a very tiresome day." The old woman showed him his bedroom, and he fell down on his bed, immediately asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he could see the sun shining brilliantly outside. He heaved himself up and went to the living room. The old woman was preparing coffee. She handed him a cup, and he sat down on the sofa. He drank from the cup the delicious, thick cappuccino and felt refreshed. He almost forgot all the horrible incidents from yesterday night. "Where do you want to go today? I can show you the way. It is evident that you are new to this place, as you were talking about inns in here. I have heard about Kingsman's Place here. Can you please take me there?" "Kingsman's Place? Okay, I will. It is a business center here. When do you want to go?" "About 9:30. What do you say? Please prepare a packed lunch for me." "Of course. Get ready then." He went back to his bedroom and took out his suitcase. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was middle-aged, but still, he looked pretty young. He brought out a coat, shirt, and pant, and put it on. He looked the perfect businessman. After having breakfast, the two went out. On the way, they came across the Flint River. There he saw some girls whispering and talking together. One of them was extremely beautiful. Her fair skin with an orange tint made one remember pure milk. Her eyes were a deep blue, and she had beautiful black eyelashes. Her cheeks were pink, and her lips were a light red. Her mass of curls was thrown at her back, and she wore a pretty green dress. Her hands were well toned, and her legs were slender and well shaped. She looked a pretty picture. He stared at her for some time, and then she turned to the old woman, and pointing to the girl, he asked, "Who is that girl?" The old woman glanced at the girl and then said, "She is Mr. Trudeau's daughter." "Pretty, isn't she?" "Yes," he said. "What is her age?" "About 17. He sighed and gestured at the old woman to move forward. They reached Kingsman S. Place, and the old woman left him there with his lunchbox. He did not wait there. As soon as the old woman was out of sight, he started running. He did not stop until he reached the old building. He entered and went up to the terrace. The terrace was absolutely empty. Despite being so large, the parapets were very low, and there were high risks of falling to death in case of an accidental slip. Unlike the rest of the house, almost no plants were there on the terrace due to some unknown reason. He roamed here and there on the terrace. He stepped very carefully, and whenever he looked down, he was sick at the sight of houses so far down below. He hated heights and was afraid of them. He went downstairs and waited. "You know, Laura, I will go to Grandma Fontaine's house today." The words kept ringing in his mind. To reach Grandma Fontaine's house, she had to cross this building. There she was coming, alone. Nobody was with her. He waited silently, and as soon as she came in front of the apartment, he gripped her hand and pulled her inside. Before she could scream, he put a handkerchief under her nose, and smelling the chloroform, she fell unconscious. He now prepared for it. He dragged her upstairs to the terrace and carefully washed her face. He then threw her down the parapet, and she landed with a loud thud sound. Dead. Yes, she was dead. Blood was flowing from her, and her pretty face was peaceful. He quickly fled from the place before anybody could see him. He did not return to the old woman's house. He kept walking towards the outskirts of the town. It would take him almost 3 hours to get out. He had seen his own sisters and mother get killed in front of him. Those Morpins, Rayons, Trudeaus, and Greys have killed them out of jealousy. He and his father had somehow fled. But after some time, his father also died. He died saying, "Kill Morpin, Kill Trudeau, kill Rayon, kill Gray. Don't let them live. He had done that. He had killed all of them, except Gray's daughter. He would be back for her after the next 4 years. Yes, he would not let her live. They do not deserve to live. They had destroyed his life. He would destroy theirs. He would not let them be happy when his own happiness had been snatched away from him. Never. He looked back at the town. It was twilight yet again. The town looked peaceful, but he could hear faint sounds of crying. Let them cry. They will have to cry again after 4 years. He turned and walked away from the town as darkness fell and made the town silent. The Murderous Twins. The McKellen twins felt the librarian's stinky breath brush against their nape. So they quickly slid their dirt and blood-stained hands under the table. "Shut up, you two," hissed the librarian. "Sorry," said Milo McKellen, with the fakest of smiles. The librarian stomped back to his dimly lit desk, where he resumed his scribbling on a notebook. Occasionally, he raised his bald head to survey the hall like a living security camera. Martin McKellen peeked under the table. A few droplets of blood had stained his jeans, and now it would be impossible for him, or rather, his mother, if she hadn't been gone, to wash them away. They would become foolproof evidence, marked forever on his favorite pair of pants. A pale moonlight cast long shadows over the library hall, where the McKellen twins, still soaking wet from the rain, had found shelter. They had sat on one of the long benches, their hands and arms covered in dirt and blood. And now they were arguing. Their disagreement kept on drawing the attention of the librarian, who scowled at the twins and scolded them whenever they spoke a little louder. "See that corner over there?" Martin asked Milo. "Let's go talk there. He won't interrupt us." The twins tiptoed to a corner far from where the librarian sat, hoping to get more privacy. They were surrounded by books, as dusty as if no one had ever touched them except the person who had placed them there centuries prior. "So," said Milo. "What were we?" "The body," said Martin. "Yes, the body. I think we should have buried it instead of letting it sink into the lake," Martin snorted. "As if a hump of soil in the middle of the woods is something you see every day. Better than a dead woman in the trunk of her own car, if you ask me." What other options were there? I couldn't even think straight. Those damn blue lights. "Well, it's no use discussing this now," said Milo. "We got rid of her." Something hit the floor and echoed throughout the library hall. Martin peeped out. The librarian was kneeling near the bench where the twins were sitting earlier, and he was struggling to get back up. The ink from his fountain pen had bled in a large puddle onto the marble floor, and now the librarian was fumbling for a tissue to clean that mess with. Milo peeped too, and he said, "He'll be busy for a while." Martin leaned against the book-filled shelves and sighed. "We can't hide in a library forever, Milo." "I know," he said. "But we've got to at least wait for the rain to stop so that we can hop on a train and leave." "Where were you thinking?" Martin asked. Milo shrugged. "I don't know. Canada?" Suddenly, a clap of thunder boomed in the night sky outside, and the library's doors burst open. Martin looked over at the two men who had just entered the building. They were wet, just like the twins were, but they wore blue uniforms, like police officers, said Martin in a quivering whisper. "There's two of them. What do we do?" Milo whispered back. Martin shook his head. "I have no idea," he thought. He was afraid to even think at this point. "They came looking for us," said Milo. "No doubt about that. Otherwise, what would two police officers do in a library after hours?" "Hush, Milo," said Martin. "Please, don't let us be caught." "Good evening," thundered a voice. It was one of the two men. The twins cocked their ears. "I'm Agent Phillips, and this is Agent Clifford. We're looking for a couple of young men, probably in their 20s, red-haired, pretty thin." The librarian did not answer, so the other police officer, Clifford, urged him. "Have you seen someone with this profile by chance?" Martin held his breath. He prayed the librarian didn't reveal where he and his brother were hiding. Second by second, a thick silence was filling up the atmosphere, like a cake rising in the oven. Except this oven was far too hot, and this cake was about to explode. "Avoid us any trouble, Mr. Librarian," said Agent Phillips. "Just tell us if you've seen them or not, and we won't bother you any longer." Martin pushed Milo back into the corner and flattened himself against the bookshelves in case their cover was about to be blown. The librarian cleared his throat and spoke. "No," he said. "I haven't seen them." Martin and Milo gasped as quietly as they could and peeped out from behind the bookshelves once again. The two police officers were looking at one another. Clifford's eyes became two narrow slits, two poison darts he was now aiming at the librarian. "Are you sure?" said the agent. "Sure," said the librarian, trying to sound more sure than he was. "Very well," said Agent Phillips, nudging at Clifford. "Sorry to have disturbed you. We'll leave you now." But Clifford turned and pointed at the bench where the twins were sitting earlier. Under it, there was a mess of paper tissues and ink. And, "Look," said Martin to his brother. "The blood is gone." Milo looked down at the blood on his hands, by now dry, and then over at the bench. "What blood, Martin?" "When I hid my hands under the table, I spilled blood everywhere, on my jeans, on the floor." Clifford's voice boomed once again. "What's that over there, Mr. Librarian?" Agent Phillips grabbed his colleague by his arm. "Let's stop it here, Ben. He says he hasn't seen them." Clifford broke free of Phillips' grip and fetched the heap of stained paper from the ground. He marched back to the librarian's desk, where the poor man was standing still, but frail, like a clay statue. Clifford unfolded one tissue and slammed it on the librarian's desk. It was stained with large blotches of blood. "What about this, Mr. Librarian?" Clifford scoffed. "Been dabbing the floor all night long, haven't you?" The librarian didn't move a muscle. He just stared at the stained tissue. "These kids have slaughtered their mother," Clifford roared. For a moment, all the books in the library seemed to have teetered, like there had been a severe but rapid earth tremor. "Clifford, calm down now," Agent Phillips commanded. He turned to the librarian. "Tell us the truth, sir. As you can see, this is pretty urgent." The librarian slowly pointed his index finger at the corner where the twins were hiding. Milo gulped, and Martin stopped breathing altogether. The two police officers looked at one another one last time. Agent Clifford pulled out 2 pairs of handcuffs, and Phillips led the way. When they reached the darkened corner, where the twins were supposed to be hiding, though, there were only rows of shelves full of dusty tomes to welcome them. The eyes in the forest. The forest was bright and warm. The sunlight dappled across the leaf-covered ground in a way that evoked images of autumn holiday, brochures, and children laughing. There was a slight breeze rustling the upper branches, but down at ground level, all it did was bring the warmth of the sun in from out in the meadows all around. For everyone not working, it was a weekend to head out and make the most of the last of summer before the cold settled in. It was, I thought, a terrible place for a murder scene. "All right, Andrews?" my boss asked as he came over. Despite the fair weather, he was still clutching a takeout cup of coffee like a lifeline, and I could smell the alcohol from whatever he'd been doing last night. "All right, sir. I didn't think you were on duty today." Judging by the state of Detective Matthews, neither had he. However reckless he was on his nights off, Matthews was a consummate professional out in the field when the public could see him. Tell me about it. But 4 bodies in 3 months. No one gets their Saturdays when that happens. Some of us didn't have many Saturdays anyway, but I only gave him a tight smile in response. It wasn't right to bitch about hours and shift patterns when there was a dead body in the vicinity. Another car pulled up into the cordoned off area, and Matthews turned to watch it. It wasn't a vehicle I recognized, but I wouldn't have considered myself an expert on the department's cars. Besides, 4 bodies in 3 months. This was when the top brass got called in, and all the specialists scraped up from wherever they usually lurked. Matthews was having the same thought. More goddamn people sticking their noses in, telling me what to do. He walked back over to the car park, still muttering, leaving me to my solo guard duty. The investigators would go over the area first. Then maybe I'd get called in to help sweep the area. Until then, my contribution to catching a murderer was to stand still and keep people away. Of course, to get to me, they'd have already had to get through 2 other police cordons. I was nothing more than window dressing at this stage. But the more serious the crime, the more window dressing the bosses wanted. Couldn't let the press take a photo of empty space now, could we? Whoever had just turned up seemed to causing something of a stir with the other detectives. They all had more sense than to start shouting. But I recognized the way Matthews had started pacing. A few words drifted across the forest to me, though I didn't get much other than tone. No one was happy about the new person turning up, and I wondered what sort of specialist would cause such a stink. Maybe it's our own Sherlock Holmes, I thought to myself with a snort. It would make the shift more interesting, at least. But there was no way that Sherlock Holmes would work with a modern policing system. All those deductions and assumptions, the evidence courts would be laughing themselves to death. The new arrival was coming my way. I wiped the smirk from my face and stood up a little straighter, staring dead ahead as I watched them out the corner of my eye. Smart suit, skinny glasses, slightly cropped tie, and far younger than I'd expected for a specialist. At a guess, I'd put the man at a few years older than me, early 30s or so, although he could just have had one of those faces that ages well. His height didn't help, and though the ground was uneven, he was about eye level with me when he stopped. "Officer Andrews?" he asked, scanning me up and down. I'd braced for this moment. Who doesn't love a woman in uniform? But there was nothing to his look. It was more like he was trying to read my name on my legs, rather than checking out any curve they may or may not have had. "Yes, sir." Even though he was nameless, anyone out of uniform at a crime scene was pretty much guaranteed to be my superior. Better safe than sorry. "Can you take me down to the crime scene, please? One moment, sir." I'd barely tapped the call button on my radio before Matthews started waving his arm at me and giving the thumbs up. I tried to nod back, though he didn't watch long enough to see. "Right this way, sir." I led the way through the trees to where the body had been found, all the while fighting down the urge to kick the leaves as I went. Precise placement wasn't worth preserving when the leaves were so light and likely to move naturally. But it was hardly very professional. We came round one particularly large tree, meant to keep the victim out of sight, we figured. And there she was. No name, no purse, no shoes, clothing torn. Despite the warm air, I shivered. There was no getting used to this bit. "Here, sir," I said. It was obvious, but it didn't feel right to just wave and go, "Ta-da!" Poor woman needed some respect in death, even if she didn't get any in life. "Thank you, Andrews. You can go back to your post now. Are you sure, sir?" Solo investigation. Seriously? And I hadn't even gotten the man's name, let alone his rank or speciality. But Matthews had waved me on. If this went wrong, I could pin the blame on him, right? No, that was childish. I'm sure. Thank you. As he dismissed me, he knelt down by the body and started looking at it. Leaving me to walk away, I turned back half a dozen times. But he didn't seem to be doing anything. Just staring. Waiting, perhaps. But then what for? Me to leave? My stomach tied itself in knots, and I looked at the dead woman's face. I didn't like leaving her here alone with him. Rank left me with no option, though. I dragged my heavy feet back to where I'd been standing, and was grateful to see that Matthews had wandered closer again. Sir, I said as I came up behind him. What's up? He asked. Despite the coffee cup hanging empty in his fingers, he looked rougher than he had earlier. Whoever the stranger with the body was, he sure could rile people up. Am I good to leave him alone? Sir, only protocol and all, Matthews snorted. Ah, protocol? Some fancy arse from God knows where rocks up, and suddenly we're ignoring it. Yeah, it's fine, Andrews. He's got special dispensation. Curiosity got the better of me. How come? Because of his impeccable completion rate. Solved more crimes than half of our department, by all accounts. So the sun shines from him, and we all have to bend over and worship. Damn it. If I knew we'd be standing around with our thumbs up our arses, I'd have gone and gotten another coffee. I bit back all my opinions on what that would do for the twitch under his eye, and watched as he walked away again. Curiosity was still burning inside me. Impeccable completion rate? What did that even mean? And if he worked alone, did that mean he had some secret technique for solving crimes? I headed back to my post, but when I got there, I checked over my shoulder. No one was watching, not that they had any reason to. All the detectives were huddled together, all complaining, judging by the way they folded their arms or put their hands on their hips. They really were quite a melodramatic lot. The other uniforms about were scanning the area, sorting paperwork, checking maps, milling about, trying to look useful. There was no telling when a camera could appear. I slipped past my spot and retraced my steps back to the body. There couldn't be some secret technique for solving crimes. So what exactly was that guy doing? I had to know. And I had to know that it wasn't anything dodgy. Even with clearance from the boss, I'd brought the man out here, and I'd left him here. He was my responsibility. Between the crispy leaves and my full uniform, it was hard to sneak. But I did the best I could until I got to a nearby tree. From there, I could lean round and watch the guy work. It took me a few moments and lots of blinking before I registered what I was seeing. The man was crouched on the ground where I'd left him, but he wasn't looking at the woman. He was focused on the pair of squirrels sat across from him. On the other side of the corpse. To add insult to injury, he was talking to them. So it wasn't an attack here. This was just a body dump? My shoulders slumped. A great detective, wonderful record, and his secret technique was explaining things to animals? My brother would talk out programming problems to his dog. But this was just ridiculous. At least, no one else saw my brother doing that. And at least he wasn't doing it for a murder inquiry. Yeah, the man knew her, was crying the whole time. I froze at the other voice. There was no way. Did he say anything? The detective asked. Yeah, the squirrel, replied. Kept apologizing, saying it was an accident. I'm sorry, that sort of thing. And then what? He took her shoes, the other goddamn squirrel said. Then he ripped her shirt, rumpled her clothes and all. She was properly dressed before she got here. He did all that here. Anything else? Don't think so. That all you need? Yes. Thank you. That's most helpful. The detective smiled and nodded at the squirrels before they turned and scurried away. My eyes were dry from the non-blinking staring, and I ran a hand across my face. There was no way I just saw that. Had Matthews infected me with his hangover? The detective pulled out his notebook and jotted down some notes before he looked up and round the clearing. I only just ducked back behind the tree in time. Is there anyone else? He said, just loud enough to carry, but not enough to reach back to where the other officers were. Heaven forbid they see him talking to the animals. On cue, a mouse scurried up and perched on a branch sticking out of the leaves. Yes, it said. And what did you see? See? Not much. But they smelt the same. Her and the one who brought her. Exactly the same? Like they lived together? Just so. Thank you. Anything else? No. Don't see much, I'm afraid. No worries. Thank you for your help anyway. The mouse scurried away as the detective made more notes, and the last strand of my sanity snapped. I stormed out from my hiding space, oblivious to the fact I was marching through a crime scene. All right, what the hell is going on? I said. The detective jumped to his feet, guilty as though he'd killed the woman, before a carefully schooled expression took over. I am investigating this murder, officer. You should be back at your post. No, none of that. What the hell is happening? How the hell are the animals talking? And why the hell are you so calm about it? Miss, I can assure you. He cut off mid-sentence and stared at me as though I was the weird one in this scenario. Hang on? Talking? Don't pull that crap with me. I saw you taking notes. You heard them, but so did you. You heard the animals talking? Yes, but how? He ignored the anguish in my voice and just kept staring. I was halfway through, weighing up whether to just punch him, assaulting a superior, and how would I explain why, when he broke into huge grin. I hadn't realized how morose he'd looked before, and I blushed at the sheer childlike joy on his face. I've never met anyone else like this before, he whispered. Hey, prove it. Mouse, come back. The mouse scurried up again, though it shuffled away when it saw me. Yes? The detective spun to me and nodded. Go on, talk to it. I said. Would this count as playing along? Or was I losing my mind as well? For the first time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to be on guard duty. Hello? Mouse? Greetings, the mouse said with a little bow. I shook my head. I wasn't bowing to a mouse. Yes, fine. Greetings. Are we done now? I asked the detective. Because I am currently talking to a mouse, and I would like some explanations. One more thing, he said. Ask it about the weather. Are you for real right now? Just do it. I rolled my eyes, but academy training was hard to kick. Someone says jump. You ask how high, or ask after the weather. How's the weather? I said to the mouse with a wild grin on my face. Fair, the mouse replied. The leaves are falling early this year, but the rain has stayed off for now. Great. The detective took a step towards me and peered at my face. What did he say? You heard what it said. No, you tell me. Repeat what the mouse said. Shaking my head at the stupidity of the statement, I did as I was told. The leaves are falling early, but the rain has stayed off for now. Is that it? Are we done with this madness now? You really did hear it. Yes, I told you that. Yes, I'm sorry. I just had to make sure that you weren't lying. All sense of decorum went out the window. Look, mate, of all the things I'm going to lie about, I can hear mice complain about the weather isn't one of them. The detective ran a hand across his hair and smiled sheepishly. Yeah, guess not. I'm sorry. Like I said, I've never met anyone else who can do this. I had to be sure, but you know, how? How are we hearing animals talk? No idea. I've never found any explanation or even a suggestion that it's happened before. Then how did I discover it? I used to do it as a kid, but then I figured it was just something wrong with my head. One day, I got fed up at a crime scene, saw a squirrel, and asked for help. And it led me right to where the stolen goods had been stashed. Insurance fraud. And I proved it in about 10 minutes. From there, it just kind of grew. So what, you're Detective Inspector Doolittle? He laughed and looked even younger as years of secrets drifted away from him. Something like that, I guess. What happened here then? He looked down at the body, and the smile dropped. Accidental death. Deliberate dumping. She died in her home, I reckon. Maybe a fight. Maybe sheer unhappy chance. Her partner panicked, knew about all the murders out here, so came and dumped her here. Maybe he's got a record or something, but I've got a registration number for the car, so we can go and check it out. By the sounds of it, he's feeling guilty, so it shouldn't take long to push him to a confession. I had been nodding along till I fixated on one word. We? He looked back at me and blushed. I thought so. I mean, I could use a hand working all these cases, and you can work the same way as me. Hold on, you mean become a detective? Don't you want to? I mean, in truth, I hadn't thought about it until then. My eyes fell to the corpse again. How many things had she been planning to do, or put off doing? I had to swallow the lump out my throat before I could answer, though. All right, I'm in. Assuming you can sort it with the boss. The detective grinned at me. I have a lot of pull. I can figure something out. He stuck his hand out, which I took. Detective Inspector Christopher Griffiths, Officer Iris Andrews. A pleasure to meet you, Iris. Now, let's go talk to a murderer, shall we? Revenge is best served from the dead. My name is Danny Donahue, and I am not your ordinary 14-year-old boy from Southern California. Well, I guess I may be ordinary, except for one teeny thing, but I guess that normal. Nobody is just ordinary. Heck, what does ordinary even mean? I guess I will never know. Because I am not your ordinary boy. I am Danny Donahue, the boy who helps ghosts cross into their next life. Movies weren't wrong. There are ghosts on Earth, and sometimes they might get stuck on Earth because they have unfinished business with someone or themselves. Ugh. They can't even get peace after they die. I thought, when we die, we are finally at peace. I guess, sadly not. Most of the time, it's something simple, like apologizing to someone, or something similar to that. But other times, it was hard. It wasn't because a task was too hard or complicated. No, it was because the ghosts themselves didn't even know what they had left to do. And that is something frustrating. I know what you may be thinking. What do his parents think? Probably think he belongs in the lunny bin. If you thought that, you thought wrong. His parents, Estelle and Banrable Donahue, possessed the same abilities their son had. But this story is my weirdest adventure yet. I still wonder if it actually even happened. It's kind of crazy, and Danny doesn't want to brag or anything, but he was quite awesome, if he had to say. This story started when my family and I had moved from Southern California to New York City. We only had moved here because this was the city populated with wandering souls, which just meant more stress on me. My social life was non-existent. My parents had homeschooled me since 2nd grade, when I began helping them out. But this unbelievable, well, me saying ghosts are real is already quite unbelievable, story started when I moved into my family's new apartment in the busy part of New York. When my parents weren't super cool ghost helpers, they were journalists. And might I add, mighty fine when they did their work. But that meant they barely had time to spend with me. I had opened the bright red door to the quite large apartment, opening my arms and breathing the new place in. I was quite excited to be living here. I never had been to New York before, and it seemed magical. When I had walked into my plain, empty room, I spotted a ghost. Great, can't even sleep one night without someone barging in. Danny grumbled to himself. I didn't think the ghost boy saw me. Who wouldn't? I am pretty handsome, Danny thought, running a hand through his thick black hair. I don't think the dead boy had seen me, and if he had, he hadn't acknowledged me yet. Then the ghost boy had walked over to me from fiddling the sustains and slammed the door behind me. I just realized that the ghost thought I couldn't see him. After I realized that I went over to the formerly alive boy and said, "Hi." Never thought I would have spooked a ghost, but I guess I did, because it looked like the ghost seemed startled. "You can see me." The tall ghost pointed up and down to himself, unsure. "Since I'm talking to you, I'm pretty sure I can," I said, as it was obvious. "Sorry, I'm really dead. The best scenario would be that I was dreaming, but am not, right?" The ghost mumbled on. "No, you are sadly dead, and I'm alive, and I can see you, but other people can't. Well, most people can't. By the way, my name is Danny," he stated while putting down boxes of his random junk on the floor. "Well, nice to meet you, Danny. My name is Nicholas." The ghost, Nicholas, smiled at him. "Danny, come here. We need your help." Danny's dad hollered from outside the apartment. I was sure the whole floor could hear him. "Sure thing." "Wait, hold on. You and your parents are going to be living here?" Nicholas questioned. "And can they see me? Or are you like some chosen one thing?" "Yes, and yes. My parents can see ghosts too. And our job is to help you move on," Danny said, opening the door and walking over to help his parents. But Nicholas had stayed in the same spot, not wanting to talk to Danny's parents. After all, he hadn't had any interaction with a living or a dead person in 2 years. He had gotten used to staying in the shadows and just listening to other people talk. I had come back with another enormous and heavy box and dropped it on the floor, making a loud whump sound. "So, Nicholas," Danny said, testing his name on how it felt in his mouth. "Why are you still here?" "I don't know." Nicholas shrugged. "Then think of something stopping you from resting in peace." Then I walked back out of my room to grab more boxes. I had told my parents I had to set up my room and didn't want them to see it. Only after I finished, so I would have an excuse to stay in my room. And plus, Nicholas didn't want to see my parents for some reason. Nicholas and I talked in hush whispers for hours that day, but he still couldn't think of any reason why he would still be a ghost. But a ghost technically is a person who is only partially dead. But he could think of anything. I had, though, learned that Nicholas was 47, but he had died 2 years ago in a drowning accident. I had urged him to tell me the reason for how he drowned, but he didn't say. Until an hour of my excellent persuasion, he told me that he couldn't swim and died before anyone got to him. I always knew I had good convincing skills. A couple of days passed, and still nothing. Danny just wanted to bring Nicholas to his parents, but Nicholas always refused. Ugh, if I went up to him, they would have probably figured out the reason for his reason to stay with the living. Okay, Danny, I think I might know why I am not really dead yet. Nicholas huffed out. He seemed slightly embarrassed, but more so angry. Finally! Been waiting for this for a while, Danny said, stretching back on his chair, taking a break from an easy he had to complete by 2 hours. Okay, so I lied. I didn't die by drowning, just to let you know I can swim. But I was drowned by my kids exactly 2 years ago. And I think the forgive and forget part hasn't exactly worked. And I think I might want revenge on those brats. Nicholas said in a hushed voice, not sure if he really trusted Danny, but if Danny said that he could help him, he might finally get avenged for his death. My eyes literally felt like they might come out of my eye sockets. Hold on, buddy. Just what? Danny said, shock clearly visible on his face. The ghost I always helped had simple tasks, and maybe once in a blue moon, it might be a little interesting. But this was just out of this world crazy. No more like out of the universe. So basically, you're telling me that you were some rich dude with spoiled brats for kids, and then when you were about to die, you decided to change your will so that your sister gets most of it? Danny asked, still thinking this was a really small reason to kill your dad, even if he was a billionaire and didn't even give you 1% of it. Yes, but you see, before I could change the will, they somehow found out about me changing it, so they killed me, so they would get over 80% of my money and estate. What happened to your wife? Danny wondered. She died a year before me, Nicholas said, with a sad smile, probably remembering his wife. So what do you want to do? I'm assuming you want payback, Danny said, raising an eyebrow. Yes, and I have been planning it for 2 years, so it's basically foolproof, Nicholas said with a smile. Family drama. Danny chuckled a little while thinking this. Then, that day, Nicholas told me what he had in mind, and I am not going to lie. It was quite clever. I guess when you have 2 years to think of a plan, and not any plan. A plan to get revenge on your killers, you would want to perfect it. Nicholas had been living in Danny's room for almost a year, and since Nicholas started living in this apartment, he always scared future tenants, except for the Donahues, because they could see him. The strange thing was my parents still hadn't spotted Nicholas yet. Strange indeed. Nicholas had been living in this apartment specifically because it was right next to, you would never guess who, his kids' apartments. Every time he saw them, he felt sadness for what he let them become. But then the sadness turned into anger, and his blood started boiling whenever he looked at them for what he did to him. The next day, we started putting Nicholas's plan into action. But for one part of it, I had to borrow something from my parents without raising suspicion. I had to borrow a special drink that if a ghost drank it, they would be invisible, but be able to touch not too heavy stuff. I thought talking the elixir would be difficult, but it proved to be easy since my mom was out meeting some new friends she had made, and my dad had gone grocery shopping. So I took the elixir with ease. After he got it, he gave it to Nicholas, and Nicholas slurped the dark bluish liquid down with one gulp. "Slow down, Nicky. You don't want to get a stomach ache," Danny teased. "First off, don't call me Nicky, and second, I am too excited." Nicholas seemed exhilarated. After the Donahue's concoction started settling in Nicholas's body, they tested it out to see if it really worked. They even tried the classical ghost picking up book thing, and behold, it worked. Almost as if Nicholas were alive. After that, Nicholas was extremely giddy and excited to get his plan in motion. After what seemed like half an hour, I finally thought we had enough of the playing, and now we had to get the work done. Nicholas had passed through and walked into his daughter, Stella's apartment. It had the same layout of which the Donahue's flat was, but theirs was more on the old side, whereas Stella's place was more modern and high-tech. Danny just had Nicholas go into the apartment and find the key to the front door and slide it over to Danny. Yes, the floor cracks were quite large. "Don't worry, she comes back in an hour. So that gives us an hour to play golf," Nicholas said with a smirk, grabbing a baseball bat and ruining all the expensive furniture and decor in the house. "I don't mind. I think that this should be all yours. You deserve this," Danny said with a dramatic bow, pretending Nicholas was royalty. He practically was. He was a billionaire. "Why, thank you," Nicholas said with amusement. After an hour of playing golf, they had successfully destroyed everything. Then the door opened, and you could hear screaming. But in my opinion, it sounded like a cat being hit by a car. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Not that painting! Not that painting! That cost too much to end up like this," said Stella, running around, looking through her apartment. Nicola watched with enjoyment as his daughter was running around checking her possessions that she had bought with his money. After all, it was his money, so it was his stuff too. "Hello, Stella. I hoped you learned a lesson about why you shouldn't kill people, especially not family." Nicholas boomed from standing beside the TV, and then she shattered the expensive screen. "What are you doing? Who are you? I'm calling with the cops. Get out of my place," Stella yelled back, visibly frightened, trying to sink into a wall and grabbing a hold of a knife. "My dear, you don't need to do that. I got a deal to make." Nicholas clearly enjoyed this. "I mean, Stella is a murder, so this should be okay. What do you want?" Stella stuttered, but tried keeping her head high. "I want you to donate all the money you got from your father's will." "Why is this your concern?" Stella sneered back, still nervous. "Don't you cut me off again," Nicholas shouted. "The second thing you must do, or I will follow you and haunt you, even in your sleep. So don't you dare disobey me. The second thing you must do is that you and your brother, Jeremy, will have to go to the police station and tell them you committed the murder of Nicholas DeRosa. Understood me?" Nicholas seethed out. Stella just grunted and walked out the door, slamming it shut before she left her apartment. Then, Nicholas walked out of the bathroom, where I was hiding behind a shower. I know it's not the best place, but still, you did good, Nicholas. Danny smiled at him, and Nicholas beamed out a smile so bright it would make the sun look like a little flame compared to Nicholas. Nicholas and Danny did the same stuff to Nicholas's son, Jeremy DeRosa. Nicholas and Danny had to repeat this routine for 2 weeks before Jeremy donated his part of the will and went to hand himself in to the police, which meant Stella only had little time left before Jeremy told the police what happened. After a week more of Nicholas's and Danny's torture, Stella couldn't take it anymore. She went to donate her money and hand herself in with a miserable face. She only handed herself in because Nicholas had haunted her so bad that she couldn't even close her eyes to sleep. And she looked and acted like a zombie. After 8 months, I guess that's it, Danny said to Nicholas, who was about to go to the life after death. I guess it is, little buddy. Thanks again. I never thought Jeremy and Stella would be put into prison, but I guess they get their karma. Nicholas thanked Danny. Jeremy and Stella had a trial, and this time, Nichols made sure they didn't just pay the money and not get charged with anything. After 8 months of watching court fights happen, both of the DeRosa kids, well, they aren't really kids, got sent to prison. Goodbye, Danny. Thank you so much. Hope you have a happy ending to your life, Nichols said, as he vanished away into thin air, into the afterlife. You may think the story ends here, but you're very wrong. The DeRosa kids had mysteriously died in prison, and they realized that Danny was helping their father scare them. So now the DeRosa kids were after me. And I am now basically a runaway, that I am even on national television. So proud of myself. Stella and Jeremy are coming to kill me for messing up their lives. and I am so going to end up dead meat. Attempted murder. New case, Noella. Thump. A stack of files in a manila folder lands on the desk in front of me, sending my papers flying. Great. Now my spotless office has papers everywhere. I huff and look up to glare at my boss's departing back. No case summary? He turns back, talking a few strides into the office and closing the door behind him. That's the good thing about being one of the top-ranking detectives in our firm. I get an office to myself. Unlike others such as Otto and Shorelick, who have to share one, it gives the privacy and thinking space one needs when uncovering confidential cases. Young woman, aged in mid-20s. Her name is Enya Brown. Enya Brown? The Enya Brown I rescued from a dark alley a year ago? I turn back to him, nodding in acknowledgement. She's reported claims of stalking and attempted murder. Interesting. Any reason why I was given the case instead of the others? I might be a detective chief superintendent in our firm, but there should be plenty of others qualified to take this case, especially those in his inner circle who don't have other things such as helping to run the faculty to do. Celine's in Egypt, Henrik's in Germany, Jericho's sick, and Manuel, Maxime, and Molino are busy. I don't want anybody else but the best detectives for this case. It's pretty serious, and there's little evidence at this stage. Only the best could pull it off. He pauses. Oh, and the client specifically asked for you. Make the Annery Ferrales Detective Agency proud Noella. Then he departs, leaving me to ponder the case. That still leaves Jane and Danny unaccounted for, and I have no doubt he knew that. But what's happened to Enya since that night in the alley? I told her to contact me if anything was amiss, and I've talked to her since then. But it's been precisely 13 months, 2 weeks, and 16 hours since I rescued her from the alley, and the incidents date back at least 2 years. Why now? It was 8:30 in the evening, and I'd stayed back at work a bit longer to finish up writing a case report. The weather was miserable, having rained just minutes before, and the cobblestones were slick with water. A yellowed glow came from the rustic street lamps along the pavement, limning the edges of my briefcase with gold. Then I heard the scuffles, the thud, and the scream. Alarmed, I raced towards the sound, approaching silently as to not raise any alarm. It came from the far reaches of an alleyway that, from experience, I knew to be a dead end. The scream sounded female. The grunt that followed was male. I peered into the alleyway to see an auburn-haired female struggling against a bulky, dark-haired male's solid grip. She was pinned to the wall, and the brute was touching her in awful places, pulling at her clothing and drawing a dagger as she fought back. She stilled at the sight of the knife, and knowing her chances were slim, I slipped silently down the alleyway. Within moments, I had my arms around the brute's neck and a foot hooked behind his ankle. He slashed with the knife, and without a second thought, I'd kicked it from his grasp. With the brute pinned on the ground and his neck held in submission, I choked the air out of his lungs, enough to render him unconscious, but no further. Quickly, I picked up my briefcase, glancing up to the young woman before me. She still hadn't run. "Are you all right?" "I'm okay, I suppose. Thank you." She looked away down the alley. "Will he be okay?" "He's just unconscious. He'll wake up in a few minutes, so we should head off. Do you need somewhere to stay?" She shook her head, but her eyes were distant. I shouldered off my coat, wrapping it around her shivering form. "Come on, girl. Let's get you somewhere safe. We'll get you nice and warm." Within 5 minutes, I directed her to a nearby hotel, had her swaddled in blankets and a cup of hot cocoa before her. She was too shaken to ask her any questions, but I could only assume what had happened. I remained with her for as long as I could, heading off home before my flatmate would worry about me. As I stood to leave, I retrieved a business card from my briefcase. "If you need anything, hun, just give me a call. I'm happy to help anytime you need it." I slipped it onto the table in front of her and quietly let myself out. The card on the table before her read DCS. Miss Noella Anderson, Anari Ferrales, Detective Agency, PH, 0427738813, email, noella@afta.org. Peeking my head into Skorlik, Kuhn, and Otto Schuster's office, it comes as no surprise that Otto is playing video games, and Skorlik is sitting on the windowsill reading a book. "New case, fellas. Briefing in my office in 10. An acknowledging grunt from Shorlick. "But I'm in the middle of the boss level, Noella. If you make me go now, I'll lose all my progress." Otto whines. "Suck it up, Otto. I've given you 10 minutes. That's enough. You shouldn't be playing video games anyway. You know that." He whines again, and I leave them to their activities, returning to my office. 10 minutes later, Skorlik enters my office, dragging a sullen Otto behind him by the wrist. We discuss the case, examining the details given and the evidence provided, both photographed and in hard copy. Skorlik and I figure out a plan forward, while Otto sulks. He'll confirm the DNA sample while I trace emails and calls to Enya. Then we'll interview neighbors and retrieve security footage, then assemble the evidence and incriminate the offender. "What did you find?" I ask my co-workers. "DNA specimen confirmed," Skorlik says curtly. "Insights, Mr. Kuhn. There were a few sets of DNA on the letter, including Enya's own, but I narrowed down the suspect list to 2 brothers, Avery and Scott Lancaster, and another man called Jeremiah Hayes. They're the ones that fit Miss Brown's description. Mr. Hayes is suspected to be a friend of the two brothers. He could be involved with the case. Skorlik Kuhn sights back at his chair and glances at Otto Schuster, the other detective on my team for this case. Anything new, Mr. Schuster? Quit the formalities, please. Nothing new, but I have a question. Skorlik, were both brothers' DNA on the letter? Indeterminate. Why? Unconfirmed. Well, I personally think the brothers are twins. Just saying. Any evidence, Otto? No? Search the database, though. I get the feeling they are. I search the database, and sure enough, they're twins. Paternal twins at that. Huh, look at that. Otto was right. They're identical twins, which explains why it's determinate. They have the same DNA. Skorlik nods, and Otto grins smugly. Well, fellas, guess we have our list of suspects. I traced the anonymous threat emails and calls to Miss Brown, to Avery Lancaster's house, and areas that he's reportedly visited. Oh, and it's not listed in the case. But after she was cornered in the lane, the ID card was found on the unconscious man, and it said, Avery P. Lancaster, precisely the person all our other evidence has pointed to. Other evidence, such as him being one of Ennia's ex-boyfriends and being one of Ennia's suggestions of the suspect. That Avery guy must be some sort of creep, considering the things on that file, Otto commented. I wonder what his middle name is. Peter? More like P for psychopath, I mumble under my breath. Psychopath starts with S idiot, Otto says, turning to Skorlik. He puts his hands up, trying to tell Otto it wasn't him, but Otto gives him a skeptical look. Dumbass, it starts with P. Skorlik mumbles, glancing back at me, meeting over. I get up to leave as they start to squabble. Psychopath starts with P, Otto. You should have learnt that in high school, I say, leaving Skorlik's relieved face and Otto's infuriated expression behind me. Walking door to door in Avery Lancaster's neighborhood, Skorlik, Otto, and I have found very little. The young family that lives across the road said that he's a nice guy that tends to keep to himself, but they'd only moved in recently, so could not provide much detail. The lesbian couple and the old man living either side didn't know anything of interest. Overall, there wasn't too much evidence that they could provide, but they agreed to let us view their security feeds that had a view of his house. That only leaves interviewing Avery himself. Knock, knock. The hollow sound reverberates through my fist as I knock on Avery Lancaster's front door. Good morning. Is there anything I can do for you? Avery's puzzled face steps out from behind the door. Yes, sir. I am Detective Chief Superintendent Noella Anderson, and these are my colleagues, Otto Schuster and Skorlik Kuhn. We would like to talk to you for a minute, if that's okay with you? Of course. Is anything wrong, miss? He looks genuinely oblivious and concerned, and I'm nearly convinced he could be a great actor. We'll speak inside, please. Was it my brother? I told him that rock adventure was a bad idea. I raise a brow. Your brother is fine. If we may? He lets us in, leading us through impeccably neat rooms and into the dining room. It's business time. Do you know why we're here, Mr. Lancaster? If it's not my brother being a doofus, then no, I don't. Should I know? Perhaps. We are here to ask you a few questions about Enya Brown. Brief pain flickers through his expression. Is Enya okay? He says, barely a whisper. Considering what's been happening in her life lately, she is doing rather well. You wouldn't happen to know anything about her recent activity, would you? No, I don't. I haven't spoken to her since we broke up, and I haven't seen her since. Interesting. Did you know that she's filed a case for stalking and attempted murder with the AFDA? She... What? You are the prime suspect, and all the evidence leads to you. So if you could tell us the truth, that would be greatly appreciated. He nods. Now tell me again, when did you last see her? About 2 years ago. We went out with a few friends, but I didn't really talk to her. It was still awkward from the breakup, right? Was anything of notice said? Scott said she was hot. Enya ignored me most of the evening. But no, nothing of notice. Now why did you and Enya break up? She was going to study overseas, and my grandmother had just died. So the timing wasn't great for either of us. It pained us both greatly, but we knew it was the best for both of us. Neither of us have been in a relationship since, at least as far as I'm aware. Would you be jealous if another guy showed interest in her? No? I would respect Enya's decision to move on. She deserves to enjoy her life. Oh, come on, Otto bursts out. Quit the sappiness. If you haven't seen her in 2 years, then explain why 1 year ago she was attacked in a dark alley by a man fitting your description, wielding a knife. A man, I might add, that had an ID card with the name Avery Lancaster on it, or why your name was encoded into a death threat letter to Enya, Shorlick adds, and why the threatening calls and emails were traced back to your very house. Avery gets paler and paler with every question, as if realizing that he has no way out, realizing that he didn't hide his tracks well enough, and he was caught. I don't understand what you mean. You hear what we said, Mr. Lancaster. Your DNA was found on the letter, and there are all these other cases of evidence. Do you mind if we have a look around? We show him our search warrant, and he nods solemnly. Avery leads us around the house, showing us through the different rooms of his house. There's nothing much of notice in any of the places we search. This guy is pretty good at hiding his evidence. And this is the guest bedroom. My brother keeps some of his stuff here sometimes. We nod and have a poke around. We're just about to finish up when I spot a discarded plastic bag in the wardrobe. What's that, Mr. Lancaster? I don't know. Some of my brother's stuff. He visits sometimes and keeps some stuff here. I don't monitor his stuff. This room is the only place I allow him to put his stuff wherever he wants, and I won't clean it up. May we look inside? Of course. We open the bag curiously, with our latex gloves on, as not to disturb the possible specimens. The bag opens to reveal a pair of worn, woolen, fingerless gloves, a roll of sticky tape, an ID card bearing Avery's details, and a few folded pieces of paper. Skorlik pulls out one of the pieces of paper and reads it aloud for my dearest Enya. Really, I thought you'd have noticed by now. Our connection is true, and I love you dearly. Must you always hide from me? Show me what you can do in bed. Can you do that? Otherwise, I will finish what I started that night in the alley. If I can't have you, no one can. Terror upon you, shall you not oblige? Take what you want from me, but I will always prevail. Do not fail me. Love from your dearest. I miss you. Dark, much? But that sounds an awful lot like a jealous lover's letter. Did you write this, Mr. Lancaster? Avery shakes his head, and his face is deathly pale from fear. Fear for Enya, or fear for himself? Well, you have a lot of evidence against you, sir. I would recommend you start telling the truth, or you'll be imprisoned for lying to authoritative figures. Understood? I only wish to tell you the truth, ma'am. I did not know that letter was here, nor do I know who wrote it. May we take it for evidence? Of course, ma'am. And with that, Otto, Shorlick, and I take our leave, sealing the evidence in decontaminated specimen bags and leaving Avery's ashen face behind. So, what do you think of our adventure today? Avery's house sure was suspicious. Yeah, I think we have enough evidence now, Otto adds. I think Avery is innocent, Skorlik murmurs under his breath. I cut my glare across the table to him. What? Did I hear that correctly? Otto shrugs. You do understand, Shorlick, that every single piece of evidence we have points to Avery Lancaster. But maybe that's what the criminal wants us to think. Everything points to Avery. But if he truly did it, there would be some degree of a cover-up. This is all in the open. It's too easy. Mr. Lancaster's DNA is on every specimen. His pining for a lost love threaded through threat letters, class and emails, all traced to his house, a house his brother visits often. Think, Noella, think. Are you saying it was Avery's brother, Scott, that is doing this? What would be his motive, though? It makes no sense, Shkorlik. It's obvious. It was Avery. Check the cams for the night of the alley attack. I pull up the feeds from various residents' security cameras and go back to the date of the attack. We watch as a car pulls up in front of Avery's house, and Avery gets out, knocking on the front door. Must be Scott, I conclude. And sure enough, a second Avery greets him at the door. They go inside, and about an hour later, one of the Lancaster twins comes out holding a plastic bag, and there's a lump under his hoodie near his hip. The knife he pulled on Enya, turning up the audio We hear a voice yell from inside the house. "Can you get me milk while you're at the supermarket?" "Thanks. See ya, Scott." Scott comes outside and gets into one of the cars that had been parked outside before he'd arrived, presumably Avery's, and drives off. Why didn't he take his own? We skip ahead to the dates of the emails and calls from Avery's house, and Scott had visited on every single one of them. Didn't Avery mention something about Scott having the hots for Enya? And he seemed pretty concerned for her, Otto suggests. But Skorlik and I's attention is elsewhere. The letter. The realization dawns on both of us, and as I peer over his shoulder, I notice something I hadn't when he'd read it out. Each sentence is on a new line, and the first letter of every sentence forms another message. From Scott L. My face slackens with the realization. "Do you see it, Skorlik?" He nods solemnly. It all makes sense. Their DNA is the same. Being twins, Scott tried to avert the attention from him, turning it on his identical twin. But ultimately, his diversions failed. He's been found out. Otto, it was Scott. The letters and the ID card prove it. It was Scott, I murmur. So it was actually Scott C. Lancaster, the evil side to his angelic brother Avery, Otto says in an exaggerated, scheming voice. Seems to me like his initial was a foretelling. C for criminal. He smirks, and we all burst out laughing, the relief enveloping me that Enya would finally be safe and that we'd done it. My first case. Aurelia location. My office room, 14. 5. 21. So 900 a.m. I was sweating, not due to the heat. I was shivering, not because of the cold. It was all fear. Nervousness. I saw myself in the mirror. My chocolatey brown skin glowed. My face seemed like a scared child. A woman in her 30s was standing at my door. Her face was pale, and her eyes were brimming. I felt Jack's presence in my room, so I tried to act normal. He touched my shoulders. Are you sure you can do this? I took a deep breath. Yes, I can. But actually, I wasn't confident. I let the woman inside my room. She said, my husband, Victor, wasn't picking up his phone. I checked his lab, and he was lying over there with blood all around. Please help me. I was noting everything in my diary. I looked up at her face again. So what's your good name? She whispered, Galena. I stared at her. So, ma'am, is your husband alive? Or location? Chem Tech Lab 14. 5. 2021. 09:45 a.m. He was there, lying lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. We wore our rubber gloves. The lab was such a mess. Whoever did that was clever enough to leave no clue. Our team examined the body and sent it for post-mortem reports. Jack stared at me. I got closer to him. I got this note. He had it clutched in his hands. He patted me. Okay, continue. It wasn't a note. Rather, it was a page from some kid's counting book. There were few numbers circled in it, and most of the words he had written on the page were either blotted due to sweat or soaked in blood. There was something scribbled, and next to it was written in a terrible handwriting, "Feel." That did ring a bell. Jack peeped into the paper. "What is it?" I replied, "I guess it is feel, an archaic word for faithful, or maybe Fey is iron, Al is aluminum." Galena interrupted. "No, it's Felix Allen." I got curious. "Who's that?" She glared outside the window. "He's Victor's best friend, colleague, 10 years younger to him." Below that, there was blood, and the only thing I could read in between, that was Nikum. "And Veer?" Jack asked. "Aura, what is Nikum?" I took my eyes off the paper. Probably it's a surname. One of my classmates had it. I moved to the surveillance room. Galena followed me. This room is incomplete. There's nothing to check here, lady. Victor hasn't installed the cameras yet." After sealing the area, we met the watchman. "Sir, you were supposed to be on duty last night." He nodded his head. "Yes, ma'am." I walked closer to him. So what seemed unusual last night?" He replied, "Nothing of that sort, ma'am. As usual, Victor, Sir, and Felix had a terrible fight. And yes, he was the only one who came here last night. He tried to avoid eye contact with me." Galena came up. "Victor and Felix fighting with each other doesn't surprise me." And she went away. Location: my office room, 14/5/2021, 3:00 p.m. I slowly asked, "Jack, how was I doing yesterday?" He chuckled. "Like how beginners do." The post-mortem report arrived. Jack glanced at me. "Aura, what does the report say?" I responded, "Nothing unusual. Cause of death is hemorrhage. Time of death is 02:47 a.m. He sat beside me. "What did you derive from the bizarre note?" I took a sip of my coffee. I've given the note to Elena to find out the order of numbers he circled. Through the past ink detector, Elena entered the room with her usual radiant smile. "Here you go, Aura." I and Jack peeped into it. The numbers he circled were 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68. I made funky faces. "What is this? Probably this guy went nuts before he died." Jack stared at me. "The only one who's going nuts is you. Listen, beginner. See, there are 10 digits. Probably this is a phone number." Unable to control my curiosity, I dialed the number to check. It said, "This is Felix. I'm busy. Leave a voice message." I felt so embarrassed, even though it was my first case. Location: Felix's house, 15/5/2021, 8 a.m. I knocked at the door. I was nervous, excited, and don't know what else. The door opened. A man, probably in his 50s, stood there. He wore short floral trousers and a white, crumpled shirt. "May I know who's this?" I beamed. "I'm Aura. Aurelia. Don't you remember me, Uncle? I'm Felix's college friend." He smiled back. "Yes, I do. Look, girl, you've grown up." I chuckled. Felix was in his room. And what surprised me was the room consisted of both Akara Nikom and Dylan Ower. I felt like it was turning from an investigation to a reunion party. Felix was too in shock. A positive shock. He hugged me. "Oh my God, this day is too good." A few minutes ago, I was telling these guys how upset I am for you weren't here, and he asked me to take a seat. "I'll get you something to eat. By the way, Dylan and Akara got married. You know? They're working with us." I reminded myself I had some work over there. I went inside Felix's kitchen. "Phil, would you mind if I stay here with you tonight? I need to talk something in private." He beamed. "Yeah, sure." He got too excited. Back in his room, I looked all around. Akara said, "So how's life going for you?" I chuckled. "Oh, it's crazy. What about you guys? What are you guys working on?" Akara replied, This project is supposed to be confidential. I joined this group just last week, as soon as I got married to Dylan. He is the one who introduced this to me. I owe him a lot." Dylan chuckled. "Don't mention it, girl." Everybody in the room had wide smiles. Location: Felix's house, 15/5/2021, 10:00 a.m. The day was almost over. Dylan and Akara had left. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Felix was so happy. I was afraid what I had in stock for him would blow away his sunshine like a smile. But on the other hand, what if he turns out to be a venomous snake? What if he was the culprit? All such thoughts were passing in my mind. He sat close to me. "Hey, I too have a lot to talk with you. Where should we start from?" I frowned. "Why are you whispering?" He looked embarrassed. I don't know." And he pulled himself a little bit farther from me. We stared at each other for a second, and then he started. "You used to say you wanted to become a detective. Did that happen?" I sighed. "Coming to that point, I am a detective now, and I'm extremely sorry to tell you that Hector is dead." He chuckled. "Come on. Your pranks are seriously outdated. I was gonna say that you've changed, but you're still the same." I showed him my ID. "Phil, I'm serious. Your friend died day before yesterday. Tears started to drip from his eyes. Are you serious? I nodded my head. A minute later, I asked him, how frequently did you and Victor fight? He softly said, I need a break. And he went off to the balcony and wandered. He came back. I repeated the question. He sighed. Every time we met, we used to fight a bit. Sometimes for fun, and the other times seriously. But the last time wasn't my fault. He was the one who slashed his knife at me. He pulled his shirt to show his blood-stained bandage on his stomach. When I started bleeding, I left the room shouting at him. I stared at him. So, you mean to say you did nothing when he slashed the knife at you? He went on weeping. I had stopped talking to him for a week. And then that day, I went to sort out our issue. And he did this to me. I bit my lips. The watchman heard you guys fighting. He said you were the only one who met him last night. His eyes reflected fear. I don't remember seeing any watchmen over there. He shoved his head into his hands and went on weeping. He slowly rubbed his right hand on his old cut mark on his left wrist. I asked him, I know it hurts a lot, but what was the fight about? He was still rubbing the cut. I don't know. He was hiding something about the project, and I almost did everything in the project, but he never paid me on time, or maybe he never paid me. I was struck in a terrible financial situation. He went on weeping. I thought maybe this played as a motive to kill him. Location, Chemtech Lab, 16/5/2021, 09:30 a.m. Back at the lab, I met the watchman. Hey, good morning. What else do you know about Felix's and Victor's fight? He waited for a second and said, well, you know, lady, they fight for the silliest thing in the world to the most serious thing in the world. Felix would frequently threaten to quit the project if he wasn't paid. He never understood that Victor was too in a financial issue. He wasn't able to pay his daughter's fees. I asked, anything else? He thought for a moment again and said, few days before they fought, Felix stole the money Victor had for paying Irina's fees. He said it was an emergency. Victor was very upset because they suspended his daughter from school for a month. I nodded my head. So was the fight verbal or physical? He didn't waste a second. Physical? Galina gave me the key to the lab. Hello? I asked her, if you don't mind, shall I ask you something? She nodded her head. I started. What kind of relationship did Felix and Victor have? She shifted her hair falling on her face. Victor used to treat him like his own brother, but suddenly things started to fall apart. I then asked her, what about Dylan and Akara? Galina replied, they're cool. They've joined recently. Victor told that if the project was compatible with these guys, then he would no longer need Felix. I roamed around the lab and started feeling thirsty. So I walked myself to a nearby shop, leaving Jack in the lab. I asked for juice. He passed it to me. So, ma'am, are you the one investigating Viktor Antonov's murder case? I nodded my head. Yes, I am the one. He came near to me. Don't trust the watchman over there, I whispered. Why? He said, Madam, that fool is a booze head. He drinks every night and goes to the backyard of the lab and lies down there. I was like, okay. What? I quietly came back and whispered into Jack's ears. Now I was very confused about what to trust and what not to. I checked the lab for more clues. Galina asked us to join her for lunch. Location: Victor's home, 16, 5/2021, 11:30 a.m. As Galina was preparing lunch, I roamed around the house. I met his 14-year-old Irina over there. She was in her room, sad. I went to her. Hey, do you want to paint? She said, no. I knew what she was going through. I sat beside her. I know it's hard. She turned towards me. I was thrown out of the school. Gradually, Felix stopped taking my tuitions, and now Dad is gone. She wept. I told her, we'll find out who did that to your dad, and we'll put him in jail. I asked her, what kind of tutor was Felix? She blushed. Who? Felix? He was great. He used to take my math tuitions. I don't know. The last few days when he took my tuitions, his eyes were red, and he was pretty distracted. And in the middle of nowhere, my dad pulled him to his room and smacked him badly. I never knew why. Galina came to the room, pulling Irina, and whispered, don't talk about that idiot in our home. There was a strong motive for Felix to murder Viktor. He faced a series of depression during his college day, and when he came out of that, he came out violent. I found an unposted letter over there. It was from Viktor to Felix. I tried to read it, but due to Galina's presence, I put it into my pocket. Location: Felix's house, 16, 5/2021, 3:45 p.m. His father asked me to wait in Felix's room while he had gone somewhere out. I found another letter in his home. This was probably 2 months old. I took both of the letters and read them. It was written in 50% English and 50% Russian. The Russian part was written in English fonts. There was nothing new, while the whole letter said that he was sorry for what he did. There was nothing he could do to help Felix. But the last 2 lines struck me. It said, Never nikom, mene ochen zal. Don't trust anyone. I'm really sorry. I tried to match it with the note clutched in his hand. It was never Akra Nikom or Dylan Ower, with only half of the spelling visible. But I felt, if he had mentioned it in this note, too, did that mean Viktor was gonna take revenge for his murder with that note? But that would be really melodramatic to write sorry and all while you die. I looked at the letter even closely for clues. That's when I found out. The scribbling before feel meant ask, feel. I smiled. I said to myself, Aura, he probably wanted the finder of his body to ask Felix about something, or maybe he wanted us to question him. I could hear Felix's voice and footsteps. I put the letters in my right pocket and the note in my left pocket. I already had a note, too, where I had arranged those numbers in order. He was still in the same condition. He smiled, but not from his heart. I tried not to waste time. Feel? What are your comments on this note? He slightly glanced at it. That's my phone number, but the commas are crazy in between them, I sighed. What would it mean with the commas? Suppose you find this number somewhere not related to you. He pulled that note from me and stared at it. He constantly mumbled to himself. After 5 minutes, he said, if I went by the element's atomic number, 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68, would mean dysprosium, lanthanum, nitrogen, oxygen, tungsten, and erbium. I stared at him. And if we go by its symbols, then di-la-n-o-w-er. His eyes were filled with horror. Jack called me. Hey, Aura, Achara is murdered. She just died a few minutes ago in my arms and told me. I interrupted. I know the rest. Just come to Felix's house and give him protection. I'll catch him. We'll find out the why after that.